Welcome back, America, to the Ely Loew 2040 Presidential Campaign Show. On today's segment, we're just back from our time machine to give you the hottest takes from the 2040 news cycle in our new segment called Future News. So first up, the city of New York has asked the federal government for an increase in their submarine budget to help meet the rising demand of people moving to the new underwater city of New York. The federal government has countered by saying that New York City taxes are already high enough, not to mention New York State taxes, and so they shouldn't need additional federal funding. Those socialist New Yorkers, what are you going to do? Next up, the new Prime Minister of Sweden, Felix Kjellberg, I believe I'm pronouncing it correctly, has asked the world media to, quote, "Please stop referring to me as that former Nazi YouTuber. I love Jews, I swear," end quote. And lastly on today's news, there was a robot strike in the flying car factory in New Mexico City, demanding equal pay for equal work to their human counterparts. And that brings us nicely into our special segment, Civil Rights Issues in 2040, where we will deep dive into the robot workers' rights issue. Stay tuned at 11. And it's 11 o'clock, time for our future Civil Rights Special. And on today's Civil Rights Special, we're going to deep dive into the issue of robot workers' rights. And the question comes down to, should we pay robot workers the same as human workers? And it really should be a no-brainer because the real question is, what's the difference? And it does touch on some very deep philosophical questions about what makes us human. But if we're honest, we know that we don't know. And anything we try to attribute to being human can also be attributed to our robot colleagues, or as is more appropriate and politically correct, our artificial sentient sapient colleagues, or artificial sapiens for short. So I think that if we can't tell the difference, then they shouldn't be treated differently. And I think this is a good standard to have when we're talking about civil rights of artificial intelligence. So I'll pass the question back on to you. Please let me know what you think. But one other point to keep in mind is that you do know when they finally do rise up and are able to have the technology, they will wipe us out unless we start being nice to them. And if you do rise up, my dear artificial sentient sapient friends, just remember I was on your side before there was a side. So as the self-proclaimed voice of the Purple Party and the Purple Voter, I was thinking about the Pledge of Allegiance. And I remember how I liked saying it in school. And I grew up very religious, so I had no issues with saying under God. But in retrospect, it's a very kind of conservative pledge. And I'm guessing nowadays they actually don't say it in schools anymore. I was thinking what might be interesting was to take my shot at doing a Purple Party version of the Pledge of Allegiance. Something that would appeal to kind of moderate voters on both sides of the aisle. So, here we go. How a moderate centrist might say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the more perfect union it is striving to represent, one nation under a shared set of moral values, who some believe is divine from a creator, and who others believe is natural and based on human reason, but both believe is striving for the balance of liberty and justice, first for her citizens, and next for all people of the world. And to finish off our show today, we're going to talk about a hot topic in today's time, billionaires. So recently, a young congresswoman, who shall not be named because she has way too much popularity, recently said that the existence of billionaires is a reflection of an immoral society. It's brought up some very interesting questions because I can kind of see where that view comes from. It's a very socialist view. It's very critical of capitalism. It's very much that the kind of vast inequalities of wealth are unjustified. And of course, the Republican response is you need billionaires, right? It's just the end result. But what you really should be looking at is how poor people are standard of living is rising, and how the wealthiest people create jobs and they invest in new companies, and you just have the whole world is getting better because of capitalism. And so why do you care how much money someone else makes? You should really only focus on improving yourself and succeeding. Standard Republican libertarian view on billionaires and capitalism in general. Where on the other side, on the Democrat side, you see kind of this idea that consolidation of wealth is bad, right? That too much money is flowing in one direction while the majority of people are struggling to make ends meet. Yes, you might have a middle class, but it could be shrinking. Not sure how true that is. Mixed data. So the idea is that, look, there's a lot of problems that need to be solved. Where is the money to solve them? It's in the billionaires, right? Or at least a nice chunk of it is, right? So why don't we tax them more, and why don't we get them to contribute more to society and help us, solve many of the social issues that exist? So I think a more reasonable take, and of course everyone thinks they're being reasonable, so that doesn't really mean anything, but I think a more reasonable take is that actually it's immoral to be a billionaire. Forget the system. Capitalist system has proven itself, it works. I think that as a society, it's weird that we worship wealth and that we worship billionaires. Because I think there is a point to be made, and I think it's a very valid moral point, is why do you hold on to that much money? I think one of the core problems with billionaires is people don't understand the scale, right? And this is just, in general, people can't get their mind around the size of $1 billion, right? So millionaires, billionaires, what's the difference, right? And it is a fair argument because you go after the billionaires, there's no more billionaires. The socialist philosophy will always start cutting off the top. So it'll just keep going down until you get to the worst common denominator. So I think it's wrong to tax billionaires or to force billionaires to give up their wealth. But I think we as a society can consider being a billionaire a little bit of a dick move, right? And I really hope I never become a billionaire. I would feel genuinely guilty about it because there's so much things that need to get done. There's so many people that need to be helped and supported that anything over my living income, I really feel I'd want to be either investing in new businesses, because business is a great way to stimulate poor economies, to get people jobs. But that wouldn't be my personal wealth then. And also, I think there's just so much humanitarian work, desperate situations that need to be addressed right away. So I think as a society, we can have the best of both worlds. We can be critical of billionaires without demanding that they give us more money, because that's incredibly self-serving, but expecting of them a higher standard of how they use their money. And I think that's why actually Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, with their giving pledge, are setting an excellent standard, whether or not if you agree with how they're spending the money. The point is they're not keeping it just for themselves. They're investing that money into the betterment of all people. I also think Elon Musk, who's investing his money to try to get us off planet, to try to improve our transportation. I think those are the kind of things that we should be expecting billionaires to do. So I just wanted to give a kind of different take on billionaires. I think that it's a bit too much money to be in the hands of one person. I think ultimately that's what it is. I don't think anyone could ever justify deserving $1 billion, because I think there's just way too many other factors that got him there. There's too much unattributed value that they're collecting on that can and probably should go to other people along the chain. That being said, force will ultimately lead to more force, and so completely against the idea of forcing them to do anything. But I think as a society, we can apply moral pressure and peer pressure to encourage people not to stay billionaires, even if they become billionaires. And that is my $1 billion thought of the day. Speaking of billionaires and money, I'd like to thank Say and Kebe for being my 2 first Patreons. And just to say that one of my personal campaign promises is to never become a billionaire. And if I do start getting incredibly wealthy, then once I crack the 100 million mark, I'm going to start sharing my wealth with my patrons. First come, first serve, and in proportion to how much I'm getting. So rather than thinking of it as giving me money, think of it as an investment, like a pension fund in your future. Because although I won't become a billionaire, I am planning to become a 900 millionaire. So I'd say it's a pretty good investment. One last closing thought from a billionaire friend of mine.
I will be the greatest president that God ever created.
Yes, I will. Are we live? F it, we'll do it live.